Welcome to Mystery at Midnight. I'm Alistair Gray. Tonight, curl up with a hot toddy because the snow is falling thick outside a lonely manor in the Cotswolds, and death has locked the door from the inside. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? A storm-lashed lighthouse? A Tokyo subway at 3 a.m.? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Wintermere. It was the 17th of December 1927, a date that would etch itself into the annals of infamy, though none could foresee it then. The world outside was a swirling vortex of white, a relentless blizzard that had descended upon England with the fury of a scorned lover, blanketing the countryside in a shroud of impenetrable frost. The 11:15 express from Paddington Station lumbered northward, its engine straining against the accumulating drifts that clung to the rails like desperate fingers. Inside a first-class compartment, cocooned in the dim glow of a single overhead lamp, sat the inimitable Hercule Poirot. His legendary mustaches, waxed to razor-sharp perfection, twitched ever so slightly as he unfolded a telegram that had arrived at his London flat mere hours before. The paper crackled in his gloved hands, the words inscribed in hasty script fluttering like a trapped moth under his keen gaze. Poirot, that master of the little grey cells, abhorred the English winter with a passion reserved for the most egregious of crimes. The damp chill seeped into one's bones, he often lamented, dulling the mind and freezing the faculties. Yet here he was, bundled in a heavy overcoat of finest wool, his patent leather shoes polished to a mirror sheen despite the indignity of slushy platforms. He disliked even more the peculiar English penchant for understatement, a national trait that masked dire peril behind polite euphemisms. Lives in danger could signify anything from a misplaced heirloom to a meticulously planned assassination, but Poirot's curiosity, that insatiable flame which had illuminated so many shadows of deceit, burned brightly enough to propel him into this frozen wilderness. As the train chugged onward, the landscape transformed into a monochromatic dreamscape. Hedgerows, once verdant sentinels along the tracks, were now ghostly apparitions swallowed by the relentless snow. Villages flickered past like forgotten memories, chimneys belching smoke into the gale, church spires piercing the low-hanging clouds. Poirot's compartment companion, an elderly vicar with a penchant for droning sermons, had mercifully dozed off, leaving the detective to his reflections. Why Wintermere Manor? He recalled vague snippets from society columns, an ancient estate in the heart of the Cotswolds, seat of the Ashford family for generations, now teetering on the brink of ruin. Sir Geoffrey Ashford, the current baronet, was rumoured to be a man of iron will and crumbling fortunes, and Cecilia Ashford, the sender of the telegram, his niece, a woman of sharp intellect and shadowed past. Poirot's mind danced through possibilities. Inheritance disputes, perhaps? A family secret unearthed by the storm? Or something more sinister, lurking in the icy depths? The train shuddered to a halt at a desolate station, the platform buried under a foot of pristine powder. Poirot alighted, his breath forming crystalline clouds in the biting air. A lone taxi, its engine idling with reluctant growls, awaited him, the driver a burly local with a woolen cap pulled low over beet-red ears. Wintermere? Aye, but the roads are nigh impassable, the man grumbled, eyeing Poirot's urbane attire with skepticism. Bridge might be out by now. Poirot, undeterred, pressed a generous tip into the driver's palm and climbed into the back seat. The vehicle fish-tailed through the drifts, headlights carving twin beams into the whiteout, illuminating skeletal trees bent under the weight of ice. After what felt like an eternity of jolting progress, Wintermere Manor loomed into view, emerging from the tempest like a spectral bride veiled in frost. It was a grand edifice of Gothic splendor, 3 towering stories of weathered stone adorned with gargoyles that leered down from the eaves, their mouths clogged with icicles like frozen screams. The manor stood isolated on a hillock, surrounded by acres of untamed woodland now transformed into a labyrinth of snow-sculpted dunes. Every window glowed with the warm amber of oil lamps and firelight, a deceptive beacon of hospitality amid the howling gale. The driveway, unplowed for days, forced the taxi to skid to a precarious stop at the wrought iron gates which creaked open with protesting hinges. Poirot paid the driver handsomely, double the fare plus a bonus for braving the elements, and stepped into the knee-deep snow, his spats immediately succumbing to the wet chill. He trudged up the path, each step a labored crunch, until he reached the massive oak door. Before he could knock, it swung inward, revealing Miss Cecilia Ashford. She was 32, with raven hair pinned in a severe chignon that accentuated her high cheekbones, and eyes the color of polished gunmetal, eyes that held a storm of their own. Dressed in mourning black, though no recent death had been reported in the family, she exuded an air of controlled urgency. The choice of attire struck Poirot as deliberate, a subtle signal of impending doom filed away in his mental dossier. Monsieur Poirot, thank heavens you've arrived. You're perilously late. The bridge over the ravine collapsed at noon under the weight of the ice. You are the last soul who will reach us before Christmas, or perhaps ever if this infernal thaw refuses to come. The manor is utterly cut off. No telephone lines, no roads, no escape from whatever shadows gather here. She ushered him inside with a haste that belied her composure, closing the door against the wind's insistent wail. The great hall enveloped Poirot in a sensory embrace, the rich scent of pine. Logs crackling in a cavernous fireplace, the subtle polish of beeswax on ancient oak paneling, and beneath it all, a faint metallic tang that he could not immediately identify, perhaps the residue of old armory or something more ominous. The room was a testament to faded grandeur, vaulted ceilings adorned with cobweb-shrouded chandeliers, portraits of stern Ashford ancestors glaring down from the walls, their eyes seeming to follow every movement. A massive staircase spiraled upward to shadowed balconies, and side tables groaned under the weight of silver candelabra and wilting hothouse flowers, their petals curling in the draught. As Poirot removed his hat and coat, handing them to a silent butler who materialized from the gloom, 5 faces turned toward him in unison, illuminated by the flickering firelight. The air thickened with unspoken tension, as if the storm outside had seeped into the souls within. Allow me, dear listener, to present the dramatis persona of this unfolding tragedy. Commit them to your memory, for among them lurks deception, motive, and perhaps the hand of death itself. Study them closely, as Poirot did in that moment, his grey cells whirring like a finely tuned engine. First, Sir Geoffrey Ashford, the patriarch at 60 years, Cecilia's uncle and baronet of the estate. His face resembled a bulldog that had weathered one too many scraps with a badger, jowly, ruddy, with a perpetual scowl etched by years of financial woes. He gripped a walking stick with knuckles white as the snow outside, his broad shoulders hunched under the burden of an estate that devoured $40,000 annually, leaving him teetering on bankruptcy's edge. Beside him stood Lady Beatrice Ashford, his much younger wife at 45, a former music hall soubrette whose stage glamour had softened into matronly elegance. Her diamonds flashed like danger signals in the firelight, but her eyes held a flicker of unease. Rumors whispered of an affair and a prenuptial agreement that would leave her penniless should divorce ensue, a motive ripening like forbidden fruit. Then there was Dr. Lionel Hawthorne, 38, the family physician, thin as a stiletto blade, with wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a hawkish nose. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, missed nothing, and Poirot sensed the aura of a man who traded in secrets. Blackmail, perhaps, for he knew which skeletons rattled loudest in the Ashford closets. Miss Daphne Vale, 25, served as Cecilia's companion. An orphan with a talent for watercolors, her fingers perpetually stained turquoise from her paints. She hovered at the edge of the group, her wide eyes betraying a mix of innocence and hidden depth. Whispers suggested Sir Geoffrey's new will named her heir to a surprising $100,000, a fortune that could ignite envy's flames. Finally, Mr. Reginald Reggie Thorne, 29, Cecilia's cousin and a former army officer turned gambler. His smile was sharp as a bayonet, masking the desperation of 12,000 owed to Soho loan sharks. He needed the estate sold to settle his debts, his posture betraying a coiled readiness like a predator in wait, and lurking in the peripheries were the staff, 3 loyal souls snowbound with their betters. Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper, her face a mask of stoic severity like a closed chapel door. Tibbs, the butler, an ex-convict reformed from a 1919 larceny charge, his movements precise yet shadowed, and Elsie, the young maid of 16, wide-eyed and trembling, as if she feared her own shadow in this house of secrets. Dinner was announced with the solemn toll of a gong, the meal a sombre affair of roasted venison, claret, and forced civility. Conversations danced around trivialities, the storm's ferocity, the latest London scandals, but undercurrents of tension rippled like hidden currents in a frozen river. At precisely 11:07 p.m., Sir Geoffrey raised a glass of 1904 port, his voice gravelly with authority. Tomorrow I shall sign the new will. Windermere Manor will pass to the one person who truly loves it, not for its gold, but for its soul. 5 glasses froze mid-air, the room's atmosphere thickening like congealing blood. Poirot's little grey cells began their intricate pirouette, sensing the web of motives tightening. Chapter 2: The Impossible Crime. The sound pierced the midnight silence of Windermere Manor, not with a roar, but with a deceptive subtlety, a sharp crack that echoed through the labyrinthine corridors, carrying on the draughts that snaked between the ancient stones. It originated from the West Wing Library, a sanctum of leather-bound tomes and forgotten wisdom, a room sealed tighter than a pharaoh's tomb, one stout oak door, one ornate brass key, and windows encrusted with layers of paint from Victorian renovations, now further barricaded by the unyielding blizzard that had piled drifts high against the sills. No soul could enter or exit without leaving a trace in that pristine white blanket outside, yet the impossible had occurred. Hercule Poirot, ever the vigilant sentinel of the extraordinary, was the first to respond. His room adjoined the West Wing, and the little Belgian had not yet succumbed to slumber. Instead, he had been pacing in his silk dressing gown, his mind a whirlwind of observations from the evening's dinner. The moustaches, those impeccable sentinels, quivered as he flung open his door, nightcap slightly askew on his egg-shaped head. He hurried down the dimly lit hallway, the gas lamps flickering in sympathy with the storm's gusts, casting elongated shadows that danced like conspirators on the wallpapered walls. Behind him, the household stirred, muffled cries of alarm, the rustle of nightclothes, the thud of bare feet on Persian rugs. Arriving at the library door, Poirot tested the handle, unyielding, locked from within. He rapped sharply with his knuckles, his voice cutting through the growing commotion. Poirot, urgent, with a trace of his Belgian accent. "Monsieur Ashford, open at once. It is Poirot." No response came, only the ominous silence that follows catastrophe. By now the others had converged. Cecilia Ashford, her face ashen beneath her raven hair, clutching a candle that trembled in her grasp. Lady Beatrice, dishevelled in a silk negligée, her diamonds still adorning her neck like misplaced stars. Dr. Hawthorne, spectacles askew, carrying his medical bag as if by instinct. Daphne Vale, wide-eyed and clutching a sketch-pad. Reggie Thorne, tousle-haired and reeking faintly of cigar smoke, and the staff, Tibbs the butler, his face a mask of stoic dread, Mrs. Danvers hovering like a spectre, and young Elsie, the maid, whimpering softly in the background. Tibbs, ever the dutiful servant despite his checkered past, produced the master key from a chain around his neck, his fingers quivering like autumn leaves in the wind. The lock turned with a resonant click, a sound that reverberated through the assembled group like a judge's gavel pronouncing doom. The door swung inward on well-oiled hinges, revealing a scene straight from the pages of a Gothic novel. The library was a cocoon of warmth amid the cold, a roaring fire in the grate casting golden hues over towering bookshelves crammed with dusty volumes on history, philosophy, and arcane lore. A Persian rug sprawled across the floor, its intricate patterns now marred by tragedy. At the center, slumped across a massive mahogany desk, lay Sir Geoffrey Ashford. His bulldog features were frozen in a rictus of surprise, a neat bullet hole marring his right temple, from which a trickle of crimson had begun to pool on the blotter. In his right hand, still clenched in death's grip, smoked a Webley revolver, its barrel warm to the touch. Powder burns stippled the skin around the wound, suggesting a shot fired at point-blank range. The air hung heavy with the acrid scent of gunpowder, mingling with the musty aroma of old leather and wood smoke. To the untrained eye, and indeed to the local constable who might eventually brave the thaw to investigate. This screamed suicide, a man burdened by debts, isolated by storm and circumstance, choosing a swift end in the privacy of his sanctum. But Hercule Poirot was no ordinary observer. He knelt beside the body with the precision of a surgeon, his gloved fingers hovering inches from the wound, tracing invisible trajectories in the air. His gray cells, those indefatigable engines of deduction, whirred into overdrive. Poirot, murmuring softly, almost to himself, "Non, non, it is not so simple. Observe, mes amis, the angle of entry is impossible for a self-inflicted wound. A right-handed man, as Sir Geoffrey was, witness the ink stains on his cuff, would not contort his arm to fire upward at 45 degrees while seated at this desk. The chair remains upright, unmarred. He was standing when the fatal shot was delivered. Someone held the weapon to his head, pressed the trigger with cold intent, and then vanished into the ether, leaving no trace." A collective gasp rippled through the group. Cecilia stepped forward, her mourning black seeming all the more prophetic now, her gunmetal eyes wide with horror. She leaned over the desk, her candle illuminating a document sprawled open amid the chaos. An unsigned will, the ink still glistening wet under the lamplight, as if penned in the moments before death. Cecilia, voice cracking, a mix of grief and disbelief. "Uncle, he despised mess, you know. Blood on his precious rug. He would never have chosen this way. And look, the will." Her words trailed off as she scanned the clauses. Clause 7 leaped out like an accusation. "To my niece Cecilia Ashford, the entirety of Wintermere Manor and its estates, in recognition of her unwavering devotion." The other potential heirs, Lady Beatrice, Reggie, even Daphne, were excised without so much as a token bequest, left to the mercies of poverty or distant relations. Poirot's keen eyes flicked to the fireplace, where a single log had recently collapsed in a shower of sparks, scattering ash across the hearth like confetti from a macabre celebration. Amid the gray powder lay a curious artifact, a shred of burnt paper, the corner of what appeared to be a photograph, its edges curled and blackened, with a sleight of hand that would envy a stage magician. Poirot pocketed it discreetly, his mind already cataloguing its potential significance. A woman's gloved hand, delicately holding a snowdrop flower, the bloom's white petals stark against the sepia tones. The suspects, no, the household, for, in Poirot's philosophy, all were suspects until proven otherwise, were herded upstairs to the drawing room, a space of faded opulence with velvet drapes and a grand piano shrouded in dust sheets. Brandy was poured from a crystal decanter, though few touched their glasses, the amber liquid swirling untouched like liquid suspicion. Poirot stood at the mantel, his diminutive stature belying the authority that radiated from him like heat from the embers. He addressed them with the gravitas of a headmaster disciplining errant pupils. Poirot, deliberate, his voice a velvet blade. "Mesdames et messieurs, we find ourselves prisoners not only of this relentless blizzard, but of a murderer most ingenious and audacious." The door locked from within, the windows sealed by paint and snow, no footprints mar the drifts below. An impossible crime, yet committed it was. Until the thaw releases us, or reinforcements arrive, I, Hercule Poirot, appoint myself the arbiter of justice in this house. No one leaves, no secrets remain buried. The little gray cells, they will unearth the truth. The room hung in tense silence, broken only by the tick of a ormolu clock and the distant moan of the wind. Lady Beatrice dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though no tears fell. Dr. Hawthorne adjusted his spectacles, his stiletto-thin frame rigid. Daphne sketched idly on her pad, her turquoise-stained fingers betraying a nervous tremor. Reggie lit a cigarette with unsteady hands, exhaling smoke that curled like question marks. Cecilia stared into the fire, her face a mask of inscrutable emotion. The staff lingered at the periphery, Tibbs polishing a silver tray unnecessarily, Mrs. Danvers folding linens with mechanical precision, Elsie huddling in a corner, her youthful innocence shattered. Suddenly, a thunderous knocking erupted from the front door. Impossible, surely, in the heart of the blizzard, where no traveler could survive the trek. The group froze, eyes darting to one another in alarm. Tibbs moved to answer, his steps measured, and after a moment of fumbling with bolts, the door creaked open to admit a figure encrusted in snow, half frozen, clutching a thermos flask like a talisman against the cold. It was Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, his familiar moustache frosted white, his cheeks ruddy from the elements. He stamped his boots on the mat, shedding flakes like a shedding pine tree. Japp, gruff with a hint of triumph. Blimey, what a night. Train derailed a mile out, storm's a beast. Smuggling case in Gloucester, but fate's tossed me here instead. Poirot, old chap, looks like you've got a puzzle on your hands. Let's see if we can't crack it before the cocoa runs out. Chapter 3. The Ghost in the Storm. The knocking at the front door had seemed a hallucination born of the storm's madness, a phantom summons in the dead of night when no mortal could traverse the snow-choked roads. Yet there stood Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, a sturdy figure in a sodden greatcoat, his moustache encrusted with frost like a sugared pastry, his cheeks flushed crimson from the biting cold. He clutched a thermos flask of tea as if it were a holy relic, a beacon of English fortitude amid the chaos. Japp had been en route to a smuggling investigation in distant Gloucester when the blizzard derailed his train a mere mile from Wintermere's gates. Stranded with his constables in the village inn, he had braved the elements alone, trudging through waist-deep drifts with the determination of a bloodhound on the scent. Was it Providence that delivered him here, or the capricious hand of fate weaving a more intricate plot? Poirot, ever the philosopher of coincidence, inclined toward the latter. Japp shook off the snow like a wet terrier, his eyes scanning the assembled group with professional sharpness. Japp, gruff, with a cockney edge softened by years at the yard. "Cor blimey, Poirot, you do attract trouble like flies to honey. Locked room, suicide note in the form of a will, and a house full of suspects snowed in tighter than sardines? I've seen music hall tricks with more flair. But all right, let's humor the little Belgian egghead. Walk me through it before my toes thaw off." His men remained marooned in the village, but Japp carried his notebook, a stubby pencil, and that indefatigable tenacity that had solved many a case alongside Poirot in the past. The drawing room, with its flickering fire and heavy drapes, became an impromptu command center, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and unspoken accusations. Poirot, his nightcap now discarded and mustaches realigned, took charge with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. He paced before the hearth, his small frame casting a giant shadow on the wall. First, the timeline must be reconstructed, a skeletal framework upon which the flesh of motive and opportunity would be draped. The household, still in their night attire, gathered around a low table where Tibbs had laid out a pot of strong coffee and biscuits, though appetites were as frozen as the landscape outside. Poirot, methodical, gesturing with a manicured finger. "Let us establish the sequence, Inspector. Precision is the ally of truth. At 11 p.m., young Elsie the maid delivered a fresh decanter of brandy to Sir Geoffrey in the library. He requested it specifically, claiming a need to steady his nerves after the evening's toast. At 11:07 p.m., during dinner's conclusion, Sir Geoffrey raised his glass of 1904 port and declared his intent to sign a new will come morning, bequeathing Wintermere to the one who truly loves it. The words hung like icicles, chilling the room. By 11:15 p.m., he retired to the library alone, ostensibly to reflect and draft the document. Then, at 11:52 p.m., the gunshot, a single muffled report that summoned us all. We arrived to find the door locked from the inside, the key still in the lock on the library side. Japp scribbled furiously, his pencil scratching like a rodent in the walls. He glanced up, his eyes narrowing. Japp: "Alibis, then. Let's hear 'em. No one moves without a witness in a house this size, storm or no." The suspect shifted uncomfortably, the fire's crackle underscoring the tension like a dramatic underscore in a West End play. Cecilia spoke first, her voice steady, but her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Cecilia: "I was in my bedroom reading a volume of Tennyson by candlelight. No one can vouch for me, but I heard the grandfather clock chime each quarter hour. No disturbances until the shot." Her gunmetal eyes met Poirot's without flinching, yet he noted the faint tremor in her fingers, a detail filed away. Lady Beatrice, her negligee drawn tight, offered a theatrical sigh. "Beatrice: I was at the pianoforte in the music room practicing scales, Chopin to soothe my frayed nerves. Daphne can confirm. She passed by around 11:30 and commented on the melody. Daphne nodded mutely, her turquoise-stained fingers twisting a handkerchief. Dr. Hawthorne adjusted his spectacles, his thin frame leaning forward like a heron poised to strike. Hawthorne. I was in the surgery annex, mixing a sleeping draught for myself. The storm plays havoc with my insomnia. The scent of laudanum lingers on my breath if you doubt me. Poirot leaned in, inhaling discreetly. Indeed, the faint opium tang was present, but such things could be staged. Daphne Vale, the young watercolorist, blushed under scrutiny. Daphne. I was in the conservatory, sketching the snow patterns on the glasshouse panes. My fingers are still smudged with charcoal. See? She extended her hands, the black residue evident, a testament to her artistic alibi. Reggie Thorne, lighting another cigarette with a match that flared brightly, chuckled mirthlessly. Reggie. Me! In the billiard room, playing a solitary game of patience with the cards. The layout's still there on the baize if you care to check. Queen of spades atop the king, mid-sequence. His bayonet-sharp smile didn't reach his eyes, which darted toward the window as if expecting escape. The staff were questioned next, their loyalties a murky undercurrent. Mrs. Danvers claimed to be inventorying linens in the pantry. Tibbs had been polishing silver in the butler's quarters. Elsie, tearful, admitted to dozing in the servants' hall after her errand. Satisfied for the moment, Poirot led Jap back to the library for a meticulous examination. The room now cordoned with an invisible barrier of suspicion. The fire had been banked, preserving the scene, and the body covered with a sheet, though Sir Geoffrey's presence lingered like a ghost. Poirot's inspection was a ballet of observation. He circled the desk, his eyes devouring details. Key findings emerged like treasures from a dig. First, the key, discovered inserted in the lock from the inside, as if Sir Geoffrey had turned it himself before his demise. No duplicates were known. Tibbs swore on his reformed soul. Second, the windows, sealed shut by layers of paint dating back to 1894, according to the manor's records. Outside, snowdrifts rose, unbroken to the sills, no footprints or disturbances marring the virgin white expanse. Third, the revolver, Sir Geoffrey's own Webley, retrieved from a locked drawer that showed no signs of tampering. One chamber fired, the grip bearing his fingerprints alone, though Poirot noted the powder residue was unusually even. Fourth, the will, sprawled open, the ink tacky to the touch, suggesting it was inscribed mere minutes before death. Yet the phrasing seemed hurried, uncharacteristic of the baronet's precise hand. Fifth, and most intriguing, the photograph fragment, that scorched corner from the ashes, depicting a woman's gloved hand cradling a delicate snowdrop flower. Poirot held it to the light, his magnifying glass revealing fine details, the glove's stitching, the flower's petals veined with subtlety. To complete the tableau, Poirot summoned Elsie once more. The young maid entered trembling, her apron twisted in her hands, eyes wide as saucers. Poirot, gently coaxing, Mademoiselle Elsie, recount precisely your delivery of the decanter. Omit nothing. The little grey cells thrive on details. Elsie swallowed hard, her voice a whisper. Elsie. Sir Geoffrey asked for it special like, sir. Said he was expectin' a visitor. A lady, he did. Told me to show her straight to the library when she arrived. No announcements needed. But no one came knockin'. Leastways not that I heard over the wind. Though I thought I saw a light out in the snow, bobbin' like a lantern in the dark. When I looked again, it was gone. Gave me the shivers, it did. Like the old tales. Ah, the tales. Poirot pressed gently, and Elsie elaborated, her words tumbling forth. The ghost lady of Wintermere, a local legend whispered around village hearths, a bride from 1843, jilted at the altar, who wandered into a blizzard and froze to death on the manor grounds. Her spirit, clad in white veils, was said to appear during storms, luring the unwary with ethereal lights. A red herring, perhaps, planted by folklore or a cunning mind? Jap snorted dismissively, but Poirot's eyes gleamed. Superstition often cloaked human malice. Chapter 4. Threads of Ice and Deception. Dawn over Wintermere Manor was a study in monochrome, pearl gray sky, alabaster lawns, and the manor itself a charcoal sketch against the drifts. No plow had reached the village. The telephone wires hung severed like snapped harp strings. The household gathered in the blue salon, a chamber of faded indigo silk and walnut paneling, where a coal fire hissed and spat. Breakfast, kippers, coddled eggs, toast soldiers, sat largely untouched. The scent of coffee mingled with the metallic tang Poirot had noted the night before, now identifiable: fear. Poirot had decreed that interviews would proceed in this room, one suspect at a time, while Jap prowled the corridors with his notebook. The little Belgian sat at a marquetry table, a fresh sheet of foolscap before him, his fountain pen poised like a rapier. Inspector Japp leaned against the mantel, arms folded, his presence a silent reminder that Scotland Yard was watching. The suspects filed in under the pretext of clarifying alibis, but the air crackled with the knowledge that each word might be a noose. Lady Beatrice Ashford entered first, summoned by Tibbs with the solemnity of a verger announcing communion. She had transformed overnight, the negligee replaced by a charcoal morning dress, diamonds traded for a single brooch of jet. Her eyes were red-rimmed, whether from grief or artifice. Poirot reserved judgment. She sank into the proffered chair with the grace of a fading diva. Lady Beatrice, you stated you were at the pianoforte until the gunshot. Chopin, I believe? Scales, monsieur. Chopin's Etude in C minor. Geoffrey loathed my practicing, said it disturbed his ledgers, but last night he encouraged it, said music might soothe the house's tensions. She dabbed at dry eyes. From her reticule she produced a lace handkerchief, monogrammed G.A. in crimson thread. A faint smudge of lipstick marred one corner. Revlon Siren Red, a shade discontinued in 1925. Poirot's eyebrow arched a millimeter. Curious. This lipstick, Sir Geoffrey wore it. A keepsake from happier days. She claimed Geoffrey had threatened divorce that very afternoon, citing her frivolous expenditures. The prenuptial agreement would leave her with $200 per annum, motive enough for tears, genuine or otherwise. Poirot dismissed her with a nod, pocketing the handkerchief with a magician's sleight. Dr. Lionel Hawthorne followed, his medical bag clutched like a shield. His spectacles glinted as he took the chair, spine straight as a scalpel. You mixed a sleeping draught, doctor. Laudanum? 10 drops in brandy. Sir Geoffrey suffered angina. Digitalis prescribed. I refilled his bottle yesterday. Poirot requested the bottle. Hawthorne produced it from his bag. Empty. Used the last for his evening dose. No receipt, no pharmacy label. Poirot's gray cells noted the absence. Hawthorne admitted to treating Sir Geoffrey for nervous exhaustion and hinted at confidential consultations. Blackmail's shadow loomed, though the doctor's lips remained sealed by professional oath. When pressed on the gunshot's timing, he claimed to have been in the surgery annex, door ajar, hearing nothing until the alarm. His breath still carried the faint sweetness of laudanum, self-medication, or alibi. Miss Daphne Vale entered, clutching her sketch-pad like a talisman. Her fingers were indeed smudged with charcoal, but Poirot noted a fleck of turquoise paint beneath one nail. Watercolor, not the charcoal of her alibi. You sketched in the conservatory, mademoiselle? The snow on the glass. It formed patterns like lace. I drew until 11:45, then retired. She flipped the pad to a page, time-stamped 11:40 p.m., a meticulous study of the library door from the corridor outside. A shadow stretched beneath the door, tall, humanoid, too tall for Sir Geoffrey's stocky frame. I thought it was Uncle Geoffrey pacing, but the height. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The shadow suggested someone inside the library at 11:40, after Sir Geoffrey's retirement, before the shot. Daphne blushed when asked about the $100,000 bequest rumored in the new will. He pitied me, orphan companion, said I reminded him of his sister. Her motive was gratitude, twisted into dependency. Elimination of Sir Geoffrey would secure her future. Poirot thanked her, but his mind lingered on the turquoise fleck. Reginald Reggie Thorne sauntered in last, reeking of Turkish cigarettes and bravado. His cufflinks caught the light, onyx engraved with a delicate snowflake motif. Chapter 5. The Second Death. For the first time since the blizzard struck, the snow ceased. A brittle silence descended over Wintermere Manor. as though the sky itself held its breath. The drifts outside glittered like crushed diamonds under a weak, wintry sun that offered no warmth. Inside, the household moved like sleepwalkers, breakfast abandoned, conversations reduced to whispers. Poirot had confined everyone to the upper floors under Japp's watchful eye, declaring the ground floor a crime scene in perpetuity. The library remained sealed, Sir Geoffrey's body wrapped in a dust sheet, awaiting the coroner who might not arrive until spring. It was Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper, her voice cracking like old porcelain. She stood at the cellar door, one hand clamped over her mouth, the other pointing downward into the gloom. Poirot and Japp descended the narrow stone stairs, 2 at a time, the air growing colder and damper with each step. The wine cellar was a cavern of shadows and cobwebs, racks of dusty bottles glinting like soldiers in formation. At the center, on the flagstone floor, lay Elsie the maid, 16 years old, her apron soaked crimson, her throat slashed from ear to ear. A straight razor rested in her limp right hand, the blade still wet. Beside her, a crumpled note in childish scrawl. I saw the ghost, I can't live with it, forgive me. Another suicide? Blimey, this house is cursed. But Poirot's mustaches bristled with indignation. He crouched beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering like a pianist over keys. Softly, fiercely. Non-inspector, 2 suicides in 14 hours? The murderer grows bold, or desperate. Observe. He lifted Elsie's wrist. Lividity had settled in her lower back and thighs. Not her arms. She had died upstairs, then been carried down and staged. The razor belonged to Dr. Hawthorne, his initials etched on the ivory handle. The note's ink was fresh, but the paper torn from a household ledger, not Elsie's prayer book, which lay untouched in the servants' hall. A smear of turquoise paint marred the apron's hem, still tacky. Daphne's watercolors. Poirot's gray cells ignited. Elsie saw the killer enter the priest's hole at 11:40. Daphne's sketch proves it. She was silenced before she could speak. But why the cellar? To buy time. The village plow may reach us by dawn. The killer needs these crimes pinned on a dead girl. Japp barked orders. The household was summoned to the great hall, a cavernous space with a minstrel's gallery and a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. The suspects filed in, faces pale as the snow outside. Cecilia wrung her hands. Lady Beatrice clutched her jet brooch. Dr. Hawthorne's spectacles flashed. Daphne's fingers were clean now, scrubbed raw. Reggie lit a cigarette with trembling match. The staff hovered at the edges. Mrs. Danvers dry-eyed, Tibbs rigid. Poirot stood on the hearth rug, the razor in an evidence bag at his feet. Mesdames et messieurs, we have a second murder. Elsie did not take her own life. She was slain to protect a secret. Let us reconstruct. He paced, reenacting the night with chilling precision. At 11:00, Elsie delivers brandy. Sir Geoffrey expects a lady visitor, a lie to ensure privacy. At 11:15, he enters the library. At 11:30, the final snowfall blankets all. Traces. At 11:40, Daphne sketches a shadow under the door. The killer entering via the priest's hole with fishing line and revolver. The chandelier is rigged, a loop around the trigger, line threaded through the chandelier's arm, weighted by a log in the grate. The fire burns low. The log collapses at 11:52, yanking the trigger. The gun falls into Sir Geoffrey's hand. Suicide. The line burns with the photograph. A distraction. Gasps rippled. Reggie's cigarette dropped ash on the rug. Elsie sees the killer exit the priest's hole at 11:55. Too late to stop the shot. She flees upstairs, terrified. The killer follows, slits her throat in the servants' corridor. Turquoise paint from Daphne's studio, where the girl hid briefly. The body is carried to the cellar, staged with Hawthorne's razor and a forged note. But the killer errs. Lividity, paint, the ledger paper. Dr. Hawthorne paled. Hawthorne. My razor was in my bag. Locked. Locked with a skeleton key? Tibbs has access. Or perhaps you left it in the surgery. Convenient for the killer. Daphne burst into tears. Daphne. I lent Elsie my smock yesterday. She wanted to paint a snowdrop for Miss Cecilia. The paint transferred then, but Poirot noted her scrubbed fingers. Too clean. A red herring or complicity. Poirot revealed his masterstroke. The hidden door in the library paneling. A priest's hole, its latch concealed behind a carved gargoyle. Inside, size 9 boot prints in centuries-old dust. A reel of monofilament line and, crucially, a scrap of burnt paper matching the photograph fragment. The full image reconstructed Cecilia's mother, but with a man's hand on her shoulder, Reggie's signet ring visible. The photograph was bait. Burn the corner to incriminate Cecilia, hide the rest to destroy evidence of motive. Reggie forged the will to force a sale, but Sir Geoffrey discovered him rifling the desk at 11:15. Reggie lured him with a promise of a loan, rigged the trap, then silenced Elsie. Reggie lunged for the door, slipped on the bearskin rug, crashed into Jap's arms. Reggie, snarling, that little tart was mad, seeing ghosts. Non, R.T., Reginald Thorne. Elsie stitched your initials in her apron hem. R.T. lies. Your cufflinks, snowflakes, match the engraving on the ring in the photograph. You plan to frame Cecilia, then discover her guilt, inherit as next male heir. But the snow preserves footprints, monsieur. Yours lead from the kitchen to the library window, brushed away, but the impression remains under the fresh layer. Chapter 6. The Snowflake Cipher. The library had become a tribunal. Sir Geoffrey's body had been removed to the ice house at dusk. The bearskin rug rolled away, bloodstains hidden beneath a drugget, yet the room still reeked of gunpowder and betrayal. A single chandelier, now unrigged, swayed gently above the desk, its crystals tinkling like ice in a glass. The suspects were assembled in a semicircle of chairs, faces lit by fire and candle, Cecilia pale as parchment, Lady Beatrice clutching a rosary, Dr. Hawthorne rigid, Daphne sketching nervously on a scrap of paper, Reggie in handcuffs between Jap and a grim-faced Tibbs. Mrs. Danvers stood at the door, arms folded like a jailer. Poirot entered last, closing the double doors with a soft click that sounded louder than a gunshot. He carried a small leather folio, evidence gathered, truths distilled. In the hush, the ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantel was the only heartbeat. Mesdames et messieurs, the moment of truth arrives. You have played your parts with admirable zeal, but the curtain falls. Permit Hercule Poirot to unravel this tapestry of ice, thread by thread. He placed the folio on the desk and opened it with ceremonial care. First item, the photograph fragment, now joined to its hidden counterpart from the priest's hole. The full image showed a young woman, Cecilia's mother, smiling in a garden, a snowdrop in her gloved hand. On her shoulder rested a man's hand bearing a signet ring engraved with a snowflake, the same motif as Reggie's cufflinks. Reginald Thorne, you are the son of Sir Geoffrey's younger brother, illegitimate, unacknowledged. This photograph proves the liaison. You believed exposure would force Sir Geoffrey to buy your silence or include you in the will, but he refused. You forged the document naming Cecilia, planning to frame her, then discover her guilt and claim the estate as next male heir. Reggie strained against the cuffs, eyes wild. Reggie, lies. That ring's common as dirt. Non. The snowflake is unique. Designed by Aspreys in 1919 for your mother as a gift from Sir Geoffrey. The cufflinks were your copy, engraved last year. You wore them to taunt him. Second item, the fishing line reel from the priest's hole beside a charred length recovered from the great ashes. The impossible shot. Sir Geoffrey was murdered by a device most cunning. The Webley tied to the chandelier with monofilament line. Your trout line, Monsieur Thorne. A loop around the trigger. The line threaded through the chandelier arm, weighted by a log in the grate. The fire burns low. The log collapses at 11:52, yanking the trigger. The gun falls into the victim's hand. Suicide. The line burns with the photograph. Distraction. He demonstrated with a length of string and a matchbox pistol, the mechanism clicking into place with chilling clarity. Lady Beatrice gasped. Daphne's pencil snapped. The will was forged after death. Observe the ink, still tacky at discovery, impossible if written before 11:15. Sir Geoffrey signed nothing. The real will remains in his solicitor's safe in London, bequeathing Wintermere to a sanatorium for shell-shocked veterans. Your regiment, Reggie. Irony, non. Third item, Elsie's apron, the hem turned back to reveal stitching. Elsie saw you enter the priest's hole at 11:40. Daphne's sketch proves the shadow. She fled upstairs, hid in the studio, smearing turquoise paint. You followed, slit her throat with Hawthorne's razor, stolen from the surgery when he stepped out to fetch laudanum. You carried her to the cellar, staged the suicide, forged the note on ledger paper, but lividity betrayed you. She died upstairs. Dr. Hawthorne stirred. Hawthorne, my razor was locked. In a drawer, any skeleton key opens. Tibbs has one, or perhaps you left it conveniently. Fourth item, a boot print cast in plaster, taken from the priest's hole dust. Size 9, nail pattern matching your boots, Reggie. And outside, beneath the final snowfall, a brush trail from the kitchen door to the library window. You entered at 11:30, rigged the trap, exited via the priest's hole, brushed your tracks. The snow preserved the impression under the fresh layer. Reggie lunged again. Jap restrained him. Reggie? Horse. The ghost light. Elsie saw it. Ask her. Elsie is dead, but I have seen the light. He produced a small lantern from the folio, its glass painted with phosphorescent paint, glowing faintly. Found in the gunroom, you waved it from the window at 11:25 to lure Sir Geoffrey to the library. A lady visitor. Elsie glimpsed it from the kitchen. The ghost lady legend was your cloak. Cecilia spoke for the first time, voice trembling. Cecilia, the will? I inherit nothing? Only your mother's snowdrop brooch. Found in Sir Geoffrey's pocket. He kept it always. Poirot turned to the assembly, his voice rising to a crescendo. The motives were smoke. Beatrice's prenup, Hawthorne's blackmail, Daphne's legacy, Cecilia's redemption. All red herrings. The true motive was blood. Illegitimate. Denied. Reggie needed the estate sold to pay $12,000 in debts. He forged the will, rigged the chandelier, silenced Elsie. But the snow, it preserves footprints. And the little gray cells, they preserve truth. Jap hauled Reggie to his feet. The handcuffs glinted. Jap, Reginald Thorne, you're nicked for murder. As Reggie was led away, his protests echoing down the corridor, Poirot addressed the room one final time. The storm concealed the crime, but it also revealed the criminal. Like justice, it is cold, relentless, and inevitable. Chapter 7. Justice in the thaw dawn on the 18th of December painted Wintermere Manor in shades of pearl and steel. The blizzard had spent itself overnight, leaving a landscape scoured clean, drifts sculpted into fantastical shapes, icicles dripping like slow tears from the eaves, the sky a washed-out blue that promised no warmth, the village snowplow, a lumbering mechanical beast with a blade like a guillotine, rumbled up the drive at 6:47 a.m., its engine's roar shattering the manor's cocoon of isolation. Behind it trailed 2 police lorries and an ambulance, their tires churning the slush into brown rivers. Civilization had returned, and with it, the inexorable machinery of justice. Hercule Poirot stood on the front steps, overcoat buttoned to the chin, his breath pluming in the frigid air. His mustaches, defying the damp, remained waxed to perfection. Inspector Japp flanked him, rubbing gloved hands together, a grin cracking his frostbitten cheeks. Japp, blimey, Poirot, you've done it again. Hanging's too good for that blighter Thorne. Poirot merely inclined his head, his grey cells already cataloguing the final details. Inside, the great hall had transformed into a tableau of closure. Reginald Reggie Thorne stood handcuffed between 2 burly constables from the county force, his bayonet-sharp smile replaced by a snarl of defeat. His onyx snowflake cufflinks glinted mockingly under the chandelier, now harmless, its deadly rigging dismantled. The other suspects sat in a loose semicircle, freed from the prison of suspicion, yet marked by the night's horrors. Cecilia Ashford, pale but composed, clutching a small velvet box. Lady Beatrice, diamonds returned, her theatrical grief softened into something almost genuine. Dr. Hawthorne, spectacles polished, his medical bag reclaimed. Daphne Vale, sketchpad closed, her turquoise-stained fingers finally still. The staff, Tibbs, Mrs. Danvers, even the absence of young Elsie, a silent accusation. Poirot addressed them one final time, his voice carrying the weight of truth. Mesdames et messieurs, the storm has passed, and so has the shadow of murder. Reginald Thorne acted alone, driven by greed and a bastard's resentment. He forged the will, rigged the chandelier with fishing line, silenced poor Elsie to protect his secret. But the snow, la neige, it is a faithful witness. It preserved his footprints, his lies, his guilt. A telegram from Sir Geoffrey's solicitor in London, delivered by a mud-spattered constable, confirmed the denouement. The true will, locked in a safe since November, bequeathed Wintermere Manor and its estates to a sanatorium for shell-shocked veterans. Reggie's old regiment from the Great War. The irony was sharper than any blade. The estate he killed to sell would now honor the men he fought beside. Cecilia inherited only her mother's snowdrop brooch, found in Sir Geoffrey's pocket, a simple silver piece, its petals worn smooth by years of handling. She opened the velvet box now, the brooch catching the light like a frozen tear. He kept it all these years. After everything, he forgave me. Her gunmetal eyes met Poirot's, gratitude mingling with grief. The Paris scandal, the broken bridges, they were ashes now, scattered by the storm. Lady Beatrice spoke next, her voice stripped of its music hall flourish. Beatrice, Geoffrey was a hard man, but fair. I thought he'd leave me destitute. Instead, I'm free. The prenup was voided by the true will. She would receive a modest annuity, enough to live, not to glitter. She clutched her Chet brooch, a flicker of relief softening her features. Dr. Hawthorne cleared his throat, his stiletto-thin frame less menacing in the morning light. Hawthorne, my razor. I should have locked it properly, but Sir Geoffrey's angina, it was real. I never blackmailed him. Poirot nodded, accepting the truth. The doctor's empty digitalis bottle was a red herring, its absence explained by Sir Geoffrey's final dose. Hawthorne would face no charges, only the burden of a cleaner's conscience. Daphne Vale closed her sketch pad, her voice barely a whisper. Daphne, I thought the $100,000 was kindness. He pitied me, but I never wanted him dead. Her turquoise paint had smeared Elsie's apron innocently. She had lent the girl a smock for a childish painting. The shadow in her 1140 sketch was Reggie, not a ghost. Daphne's legacy was her art, not blood money. The staff were dismissed with quiet dignity. Tibbs, his larceny past buried deeper than the snow, received a nod from Poirot for his steadfast service. Mrs. Danvers, her chapel face softening, was tasked with preparing Elsie's body for burial, a tragic duty. The maid's stitched accusation, "R.T. lies," would be her epitaph. Reggie's final moments in the hall were a study in collapse. Reggie, hoarse, defiant to the last. You think you've won, Poirot? The regiment gets the house. Bunch of broken men. I was owed this. Save it for the dock, Thorne. The constables marched him out to the waiting lorry, his boots leaving wet prints on the flagstones, prints that would not be brushed away this time. The snow plow had cleared a path to justice. The restoration of truth is payment enough, monsieur. Wintermere will heal wounds greater than mine. He did accept a small token, a silver cigarette case engraved with the Ashford crest, offered by Cecilia. Inside she had placed a single snowdrop, pressed flat, its delicate veins preserved like a memory. As the household dispersed, Poirot and Japp lingered in the library for a final survey. The chandelier had been rehung, its crystals sparkling innocently. The priest's hole was sealed, the fishing line confiscated, the photograph, now whole, returned to Cecilia. Japp lit a pipe, exhaling a cloud that curled like a question mark. Neat as a yard manual, Poirot. The ghost light, lantern with glow paint, clever bastard. Clever, but not clever enough. The snow conceals, but it also reveals, like the little grey cells. The ambulance bore Sir Geoffrey and Elsie to the village mortuary. The sanatorium's trustees would arrive by week's end to claim Wintermere. Cecilia planned to stay on as caretaker, tending the gardens where snowdrops would bloom in spring. Beatrice departed for London, her diamonds packed away. Hawthorne returned to his practice, vowing tighter locks. Daphne took her sketches and left for art school in Florence, a small bequest from the sanatorium fund securing her path. Poirot's train. South was waiting at the station, the tracks cleared by the plow. He boarded the first-class carriage, settling into a seat warmed by a hot water bottle. As the Cotswolds shrank to a handkerchief of white, he opened the cigarette case. The pressed snowdrop stared up at him, fragile yet enduring. Chapter 8. Echoes in the Thaw. Hercule Poirot descended from the taxi outside his flat. the silver cigarette case, Ashford crest glinting, tucked into his breast pocket beside a pressed snowdrop. The city had shrugged off the storm. Only slushy gutters and bare plane trees bore witness to the blizzard that had paralyzed the nation. Yet the newspapers screamed the tale. Snow Death Manor, heir arrested. A grainy photograph of Windermere dominated the front page. Gargoyles leering like accomplices. Inside, the flat was an oasis of order. Green velvet curtains drawn against the fog. The scent of verbena from a simmering samovar. George the valet polishing a samovar with military precision. A single telegram awaited on the salver, its envelope embossed with the crest of the Windermere Sanatorium Trust. Poirot's mustaches twitched. Half amusement, half melancholy, Reggie, caged in wormwood scrubs awaiting trial, would convalesce beneath the roof he murdered to possess. The snowdrop, symbol of hope, would bloom over his remorse. George cleared his throat. George. Inspector Japp telephoned, sir. Says the yard's treating him to a pint at the Cheshire Cheese. Asks if you'll join. Tell the good inspector I prefer my celebrations sans the odor of ale, but send him a bottle of the 21 Veuve Clicquot with my compliments. Alone, Poirot poured a finger of tisane, settled into his bergère, and opened the cigarette case. The pressed snowdrop lay fragile between silk lining. He twirled it gently, grey cells drifting back to Windermere. Memory, Cecilia Ashford, standing in the manor doorway as the train pulled away, brooch pinned to her coat. She had pressed a small parcel into his hand. A watercolor by Daphne, the library at dawn, chandelier innocent, snowdrops pushing through the drifts outside the window. On the reverse, Daphne's note, for the man who saw through the storm. Memory, Lady Beatrice, boarding the London train with a single trunk, diamonds sold to fund a modest flat in Chelsea. A postcard arrived that morning. The stage lights are kinder than Windermere's shadows. Merci. Memory. Dr. Hawthorne, locking his surgery door for the last time, accepting a post at a Harley Street clinic. His razor, returned cleaned, now rested in Poirot's drawer, evidence filed, lesson learned. Memory. Elsie, laid to rest in the village churchyard, a posy of hothouse snowdrops on her grave. Mrs. Danvers had stitched a tiny sampler. She saw truth and paid the price. Poirot rose, crossed to the window. London's fog swirled like the blizzard's ghost. He opened the case, let the snowdrop petal drift into the night. It vanished into the yellow lamplight, truth like snow, ephemeral yet eternal. The gramophone played on, a slow foxtrot weaving through the room. Poirot allowed himself a small smile. Another case closed, another order restored. But in the silence between notes, he heard Windermere's wind, whispering that no storm, no secret, could bury the little grey cells forever. Chapter 9. The Snowdrop Gala. London had donned its festive mask, holly wreaths on every door, gas lamps strung with tinsel, the scent of roasted chestnuts drifting from street corners. Yet the ton buzzed with one topic, the snow death mystery, now dubbed L'Affaire Windermere in the society columns. Invitations to the Snowdrop Gala, a charity soiree for the Windermere Sanatorium, had become the season's most coveted prize. And at the center of the whirlwind stood Hercule Poirot, resplendent in white tie, his Order of Leopold pinned discreetly, mustaches waxed to saber points. The ballroom was a confection of gold and ivory, mirrors reflecting infinite chandeliers, hothouse snowdrops massed in silver bowls, thousands of them flown in from Scilly at ruinous expense. A banner proclaimed, "In memory of Sir Geoffrey Ashford and Elsie Phipps, truth blooms eternal." The trustees had spared no detail. Even the menu cards were edged with pressed snowdrops. Poirot entered to a ripple of applause, flashbulbs popping like miniature gunfire. Lady Amelia Fortescue, hostess, diamonds rivaling the chandeliers, swept forward, fan fluttering. Lady Amelia, "Monsieur Poirot, you are our guest of honor. The sanatorium ward opens tomorrow. Your ward. The king has sent regrets but a donation of 500. Poirot bowed, murmuring, "Poirot, one does what one can, madame. Order and method, they conquer even chaos." At the high table, familiar faces awaited. Cecilia Ashford in dove-grey silk, the snowdrop brooch her only jewel, raised a glass of champagne. Cecilia, to the man who gave Windermere a future. Beside her, Daphne Vale, transformed in sapphire velvet, presented a framed watercolor. The manor in spring, snowdrops carpeting the lawn, a tiny plaque for Hercule Poirot, who saw light in the storm. Dr. Hawthorne, uncomfortable in evening dress, offered a stiff handshake. Hawthorne, my new post at Bart's, your recommendation opened doors. The razor incident, even Lady Beatrice appeared, toned down but radiant, a modest pearl choker replacing diamonds. Beatrice, darling, I'm producing a one-woman show, The Blizzard Bride. You'll come to the premiere? Poirot chuckled, accepting all toasts with grace. The quartet struck up a waltz. Poirot, begged for a dance, declined with a twinkle. My feet prefer the dance of deduction, madame. Instead, he circulated gray cells, cataloguing reactions. A dowager whispered of Reggie's trial, set for the Old Bailey in March, the fishing line trap already legend. A young subaltern, shell-shocked eyes, bright, thanked Poirot for the sanatorium bed that awaited him. At 9:30 the auction began. Lots donated by the great and good. Lot 7. The Webley revolver, decommissioned, mounted in a glass case labeled Instrument of Truth. Bidding soared to $200 before Poirot intervened, purchasing it anonymously for the Sanatorium Museum. Lot 12. Daphne's original sketch of the library shadow, framed with the turquoise smudged apron fragment. It fetched $150, the buyer a tearful Mrs. Danvers, bidding by proxy. Midnight approached. The quartet hushed. Lady Amelia led Poirot to a small dais. A velvet curtain parted, revealing a bronze plaque. The Hercule Poirot ward, where order defeats despair. Below, a single snowdrop in a crystal vase. The room erupted in applause. Poirot, for once speechless, bowed deeply. Later, on the balcony overlooking Brook Street, he lit a tisane-scented cigarette. The fog had lifted. Stars pricked the sky like ice crystals. Cecilia joined him, brooch gleaming. Windermere reopens in April. Gardens, therapies, hope. Will you visit? Perhaps, mademoiselle. Snowdrops are tenacious. They return after the harshest winter. She pressed a tiny envelope into his hand. Inside, a dried snowdrop petal and a note. Truth, like spring, always comes. As the quartet played a final waltz, Poirot watched London sparkle below. The snow death mystery was closed, its echoes transformed into light. Another triumph for the little gray cells. Chapter 10. The Order of the Snowdrop. Hercule Poirot entered his flat like a man returning from a battlefield, victorious, yet carrying invisible wounds. George had left a single lamp burning, the fire banked low, a decanter of crème de menthe and a plate of petits fours on the lacquered tray. On the mantel, the silver cigarette case from Windermere gleamed beside the pressed snowdrop from Cecilia's envelope. The gala's bronze plaque had been delivered by courier, miniature, for his desk. The Hercule Poirot ward. He traced the letters with a gloved finger, then set it upright like a sentinel. Poirot poured a finger of the green liqueur, settled into his bergère, and allowed the silence to envelop him. The little gray cells, so often a whirlwind, now moved in slow, deliberate circles, reviewing, refining, filing. A discreet note from the Director of Public Prosecutions had arrived that morning. Reggie Thorne's defense would claim shell shock insanity, the ghost light, the fishing line trap, all symptoms of a mind shattered at Passchendaele. The sanatorium ward, ironically, would be cited as mitigating circumstance. Poirot had penned a terse memorandum. Motive was greed, not madness. The snow preserved the footprints. Let justice preserve the truth. The hanging, he suspected, would be commuted to life. Windermere's walls would hold Reggie, after all. Cecilia had enclosed a second gift with the gala envelope, a slim ledger bound in white vellum. Inside, in Daphne's delicate hand, were watercolor sketches of every clue. The chandelier scratch, the priest's hole dust, Elsie's stitched accusation, the ghost lantern's glow paint residue. On the final page, a dedication. Poirot smiled. The ledger would join his private archives. Beside the Orient Express dossier, the ABC murders map, the Styles case notes, the samovar bubbled. George appeared, impeccable in dressing gown. George, shall I draw your bath, sir, or is there another case? Non. mon ami. Only the case of a tired detective and his tisane. Yet as George retreated, Poirot's gaze fell on a final, unopened envelope, thick cream stock, sealed with a snowdrop wax impression. No postmark. Delivered by hand. Slit it with a silver letter opener. Inside, a single card, handwritten in elegant copperplate. Monsieur Poirot, you restored order to Wintermere, but order is fragile. A new storm gathers, this time in the Alps. A chalet, a locked funicular, a death at 3,000 meters. The snow falls again. Will you come? No signature. Only a faint scent of verbena and gun oil. Poirot's mustaches bristled. See? Cecilia? No, her scent was lily of the valley. C for Countess, Challenger, culprit, the Alps, neutral ground, international stakes. A locked funicular was impossible in the classic sense. His pulse quickened. He rose, crossed to the window. London slept under a thin, improbable dusting of snow, a final gift from the departing storm. A lone flake settled on the sill, perfect, hexagonal, orderly. Poirot watched it melt. Eh bien, the little gray cells do not retire, they merely relocate. He turned to the desk, opened a fresh dossier, and wrote in his neat slanted hand. George reappeared with the bath drawn. Poirot waved him away, already reaching for his Bradshaw's Continental Railway Guide. The snowdrop on the mantel seemed to nod in approval. Outside, Big Ben struck 2. Somewhere a train whistle sounded, southbound to Dover, to Calais, to the high white silence of the mountains. The next mystery was calling, and Hercule Poirot, as always, would answer.